Hello everyone, thank you for joining us here on Alumni Pride. I'm Wayne McCullough. I tell you folks, we have truly one of the people that I am proud to say that I have known for all of my life, Daniel Jess Mays, who is a 1943 graduate of New Freedom High School, and just an icon in the southern York County area for all the things he's done to contribute to the educational process of generation after generation of students, but also what he's done to the community. But truly just a man that I have as much respect for as any man I've ever met. I'm going to affectionately call him Jess Mays. That's what he goes by. So we're just going to sit here and talk with Jess Mays today on Alumni Pride. So Mr. Mays, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks you, Wayne. It was in the decade of the 20s, and my dad, in order to make a little extra money, would go over to Mort McCullough's farm. He had a lot of cedar trees. My dad would buy these trees for, I think, about 10 cents from Mort and get a big load of them, bring them into New Freedom, sell them off. That's how far back I go to know the McCullough clan. But after Wayne told me about coming out here and all, and I came with some props, I didn't know what all I'd need to talk. Well, I figured I'd like to say something on behalf of a teacher of Southern York School District, and I was with him yesterday, and he's had some tough luck in life, and I'd like to talk about Thomas A. Kerrigan, who came here in 1942 from Gettysburg College and became a teacher in Southern School District. And prior to World War II, a book was written about a schoolmaster in England who taught at the same school for almost 3/4 of a century. His proper name was Mr. Chipping, C-H-I-P-P-I-N-G. The boys renamed him Mr. Chips. The book is titled Goodbye, Mr. Chips. A copy is available in our Glen Rock Library system, located at Hanover Library. It is a classic, and I recommend it as a tribute to the life of Mr. Kerrigan at Southern School District. You borrow it and read it. This classic will really impress you. Now, I've always had respect for sports writers, and years ago Grantland Rice was an icon as a sports writer when I was a young boy growing up. And he was known as the American sports writer's favorite between 1900 and 1950. He was a native of Tennessee and excelled over other writers like Ring Gardner and Haywood, Hale Brown, Westbrook Pegler, Damon Runyon, and Paul Gallico. He put readers inside the worlds and minds of athletes. A first person you are, their style. Rice was responsible for instituting the annual college football All-American team. He was a star baseball player, a member of the track team, star and captain of the football team at Vanderbilt University in his youth. And he was outstanding as a golfer, a scratch player later in his life. And what I'm going to say now is a classic. It's a baseball ballad by Grantland Rice, and it's called Game Called. Across the field of play, the dusk has come. The hour is late, the fight is done, and also won. The players have filed out through the gate. The tumult dies, the cheers hushed, the stands are bare, the park is still. But through the night there shines a light, home beyond the solid hill. Game called. Where is the golden light? The bugle rolled the reveille. The shadows creep where night falls deep, and taps has called the end of play. The game is done. The score is in. The final cheer and jeer have passed. But in the night beyond the fight, the player finds his rest at last. Game called. Upon the field of life the darkness gathers. Far and wide, the dream is done. The score is spun. It stands forever in the guide. Nor victory, nor yet defeat is chalked against the player's name, but down the rolls finds the final scroll. It stands only how he played the game. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I said this, this hat that we had here, I wore it because Mr. Kerrigan not only was a fine history teacher, and he had classes this past year in the adult education program, but he was crazy about baseball, and he took a liking to working for the county baseball and this baseball tournament. He was in charge of that for 30-some years, and he's quite a man.
Truly is quite a man. Mr. Mays talking about Mr. Thomas Kerrigan, a teacher here, really when the school opened up. And like you said, what he's given to youth here in the community is incredible. And like he still, even this year, taught adult education classes in history. I remember as a student, gosh, back in the early 1970s, he took me to my first Philadelphia Phillies game. He wouldn't have had to do that. You know, we're talking in class, and he said, "Hey, have you ever seen the Phillies play?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, this Sunday we're going there." And sure enough, he pulls up in front of my house, picks me up, and we go down to Philadelphia. But that's the kind of man he was. Truly was. Let's go back to your life a little bit. You know, you graduate from New Freedom High School in 1943.
What happened, Mac? Leonard Itzo had a paper business in New Freedom, and I started delivering papers about 1938, and that was right prior to World War II. And I delivered papers for 7 years. And all the papers that came to town had the headlines as World War II was developing, and you know, Hitler was taking up land and stuff. And I'd read the headlines, and people would come in there to get the Baltimore News Post or the York Dispatch or the York Gazette and Daily or the Philadelphia Inquirer. Len had about 7 or 8 papers that he used to be in charge of, and then he had to hire the paper boys to deliver them. So in my senior year in 1943, the war was, that's 2 years after Japan attacked it at Pearl Harbor. And the governor of the state of Pennsylvania made a decree, and they told all the boys in the school that if any boy that had finished, and the girl would be the same, they could have went in the wax, but we didn't have any girls in our class. We had 28 students. We had girls in our class, but none of them went into service. We had 28 students in our graduating class, and the story was that if you were in the if you finished the first semester of your senior year, and you were in good standing with the school, and you would volunteer to go into service, you'd be graduated in the spring of the year with your class. And Cole Williams and myself and Donald Jung and Earl Helfrich, the 4 boys, we went into service in February of 1943, and then our parents in June when we graduated and they had the baccalaureate service, they went and got our diploma but I was out at Fort Lewis, Washington there, and I had my basic training by that time. I have something here I'd like to just bring out and show you what had happened to me. If I could find these, I had some layouts here. Maybe I'll go down here once. See you. If you in the past 2 or 3 years, they've made war pictures, and a guy by the name of I still don't have the right piece that goes with this here. You just hold that a minute back for it.
There you go.
I got too much stuff.
You do have lots of stuff, I got to tell you that.
Yeah. But this, I'm printing a book. I've printed a book here about the American Insulator. It was in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. It's no longer, they've tore it down, it's disbanded, but they trained 75 tool and die makers over the history of the company, and they sponsored baseball. And then I did a book on Glen Rock. It's called 100th Anniversary of Sports in Glen Rock, Pennsylvania. And I was interested in sports, I had an opportunity to go away and play some minor league baseball for Pittsburgh. And so I was interested in baseball after I got back from World War II.
Now tell us where you served in World War II. Where were you?
Well, in World War II, I was in the Battle of the Bulge. But this
Okay.
here, this has a story. Here it is.
This is the story about the Battle of the
Here's
Bulge.
what I wanted to show you.
Okay.
And this is called the Devil's Brigade, Mac. And
Okay.
if you pardon me for calling you Mac,
That's
but
all right. Yeah, please.
here it says, in the time of heroes just like a fighting commandos of the Devil's Brigade. William Holden, he also made the movie At the Bridge of River Tulgari and the bridge at River Kwai, and he was one of the best actors for making movies for World War II. He also did Stalag 17, and now here he made this movie called The Devil's Brigade, and what it was, he plays Lieutenant Colonel Robert T. Frederick, who molds a misfit GI and cracked Canadian troops into a intrepid fighting unit. And he went to Washington and saw Mark Clark, and he took the whole outfit into Italy and come up through Italy. And then he was in the invasion. I guess when there was a rotation of soldiers, he'd lose so many when they'd get killed. And they put him in charge of the 45th Infantry Division, and he was in on the invasion of southern France. And he came up through France, and just before the Battle of the Bulge started, I was in a unit called Task Force Heron, and they sent us over, and I fought under the Devil's Brigade. A man was called, Colonel Robert Frederick, but when our outfit got in combat at the Battle of the Bulge, he was the commander of the 45th Infantry Division, and we spent 3 weeks with him.
Wow.
And I was always proud of that.
You should be. Can you imagine,
just
all young people listening to think that before you graduated from high school, in the spring of your high school senior year, leaving, going to basic training, and then being in World War II at that age, I mean, it's hard to imagine. I mean, it's just hard to imagine.
Well, Olivia Frederick was a school teacher, and she lived across the street from where I was. And I went up to Harrisburg to weigh in. I weighed 126 pounds. I used to have an uncle would tell me, he said, Bud, he said, you're going to have to start drinking muddy water or people are going to look through you, when you were a kid. But she cried, she said, when she watched me go down the path, and she knew I was leaving. But I was supposed to go into the Air Force when we left here, and we got out to Fort Lewis, Washington. They had a first sergeant named Lex, and he was a regular Army man. He had these hash marks from his elbow down to his wrist, and each one of those hash marks represented 3 years of service, and he almost had that full. And I told him, he said, what do you want, kid? And I said, I told him, I said, I volunteered to go in the service, supposed to get in the Air Force, and here they sent me out here in an infantry outfit. And he said, you damn kids ought to be home with your mother on there.
Yeah, and you probably should have been.
Yeah, that's the way he talked back to you.
So after the Battle of the Bulge, you come back from World War II, you go to Dickinson College, and then you already mentioned that you got drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates and played minor league baseball in their system a little bit. Do you want to relive some of that with us?
Well, that was a big time in America because they kept the major leagues going. President Roosevelt got a hold of the commissioner of baseball and says, for the morale, we're not going to disband baseball. We're going to keep baseball continually through the war effort if we can. And a lot of guys like Ted Williams and DiMaggio, some of the great stars, they were going to go into service. They weren't going to stay out. And they brought it, what they did, they recruited a lot of older players that had played in the big leagues to get back in to help them see this thing through. And a lot of towns, New Freedom and Glen Rock and Shrewsbury, they had good sandlot baseball here, but they had to disband on account of the war. And the people were hungry for baseball when the war was over, 1945, 46. And the guys coming back. And the major league clubs in those days would be nothing to have 18 minor league teams scattered out in America in these leagues. And most of them were young boys that came back out of the service, and they had to go out and sign up boys to fill the rosters of these teams. So my first year, I signed up with Hornell, New York in the Pony League, and the Pony League's P was for Pennsylvania, and O was for Ontario. They had one team up in Ontario that was in the league and one team in Pennsylvania. Bradford, Pennsylvania, and Ontario, Hamilton, Ontario was in the other one. And the NY stood for New York, and New York had the rest of the teams. They had 6 teams, and Pennsylvania had the 7th. And
well, that league, I believe, is still around. The New York Penn League is what they call it now.
yes,
But
that's
it's evolved
right.
into
And
the
it
New
was
York
an
Penn
old
League.
league because I've been reading about the Baltimore Orioles in 1995. They had a team, and the guy that turned out to be their third baseman and a great manager was Muggsy McGraw, and he played his first. He broke into baseball at OEA in New York in the Pony League.
Did he really?
They had a league going back then.
And that's something.
And then I went from there. I mean, baseball was all I thought about. And I gave up a college education. I was a first semester sophomore up at Dickinson College, and I quit college to play baseball, and I never got back. But the first year was at Hornell, and the second year I was down in Greenville, Alabama. We went spring training for 6 weeks down in Winter Haven, Florida. Then the third year I was at Salisbury, North Carolina, and I split that season, went from Salisbury, North Carolina. They sold me down to New Iberia, Louisiana. And then the last year I went to spring training at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and played at Hagerstown, Maryland. And then I gave it up, and I met my wife and married her. She was a Glen Rock girl, and I had a chance to learn a tool and die making trade in American Insulator. And then I was in industry the rest of my life and finished up with the Caterpillar Tractor Company. And I was so lucky that I got with them, and before I could get retirement, and I got a real good retirement plan. It's probably the best company in the United States as far as fringe benefits go.
Yeah, I would think so. People don't realize the history of baseball. I know you wrote a book on the history of baseball and sports in Glen Rock, but people don't realize the rich history in the southern York County area.
That's
I mean,
right.
the teams travel to play each other. I remember as a kid going down to Centerville, which is right outside of Glen Rock, and it was nothing for a town team game to have well over 1,000, sometimes 2,000 people there.
That's right. That's right.
It's just amazing.
Everybody. Well, they talked it at the supper tables. You know, the parents talked it, and then the uncles and aunts were talking about it if they had a son playing, and it was something you just could. You had to live through it to really enjoy it, because we played at a game the first year in '46. New Freedom tied with Jefferson, and Jefferson's star pitcher was Fritz Staub, and New Freedom's star pitcher was Ty Young. And it was at the end of the season we were all tied with the same record. So they're going to play this game on Labor Day in the fall of 1946. It was. This was '46, and they estimated the crowd to be over 3,000 people down at Glen Rock. We played on a neutral diamond down at Glen Rock. And New Freedom had a population of about 1,200 people, and Shrewsbury and Glen Rock pretty much close to the same. But you get 3,000 people coming.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned in your book about the history of sports in Glen Rock, some of the famous people that come out of the Glen Rock area into the major leagues. You want to mention some of those names?
Well, Heathcote was
Cliff Heathcote.
Cliff Heathcote was outstanding, and he was from the family in Glen Rock, and he went to Glen Rock High School. It was only a 2-year high school, and then he started up at Penn State. And Branch Rickey was the owner of the St. Louis Cardinals, and he heard about him, and he come in here and scouted him. And Cliff was a small stature, but he was fast as lightning. He could run fast as a Dickens, and he was a left-hand thrower. And he got in the big leagues with the Cardinals, and then he played most of his Major League Baseball with the Chicago Cubs, and he got over 15 years in the big leagues. And New Freedom would go to Baltimore, and if they needed a pitcher was a big thing in baseball, and they needed a pitcher, they'd go to Baltimore. If they got Puggy Donahue from out of Baltimore when he was about 16 or 17, brought him to New Freedom, give him a job in the insulator. He met a gal and married and spent the rest of his life in New Freedom. Jimmy Clancy was the same way. He was a slick left-hand player, a first baseman. And they went to York and got Kenny Rauffenberger when he graduated from high school and brought him to New Freedom, give him a job, and he pitched his first year in Sandlot baseball out of high school for New Freedom. But this is what they would do, and New Freedom developed. A lot of the people, like from Shrewsbury and New Freedom, were a little bit jealous of New Freedom because they had a factory that the president and the board of directors would do this stuff, you know. And then what they did in 1939, they took the team and they sponsored them and sent them to Vandergrift, Pennsylvania for 3 weeks to compete in the Pennsylvania Semi-Pro Baseball Tournament. And Joe Burley and Chick Gladfelder and some of these fellows that was on the team, they paid their salary, you know, to go out there to that baseball tournament. It was quite a big thing, and it was really important. They took their baseball serious.
They did. We could go on for hours and hours talking baseball, but one of the things that I always remember you for, and there's many of those, but in 1972, Hurricane Agnes came through and absolutely destroyed the Glen Rock ball field, which is located down in Centerville. So for the first time, I don't know, in anybody's memory, we're without a ball field. And we're really without a place for the Glen Rock town team to call their own home. And you were probably the #1 major player in having the new Glen Rock Park built. And tell us a little bit about that.
At that time, Mac, Elliot Brees was a plant manager up at Caterpillar Tractor Company at York, and he came to me. And he said, yes, he says, we have a corporate policy that if anybody gets wiped out, like Glen Rock got hit, we'll loan them earth-moving equipment that we have in our yard. And Freddie Moorhead was working up there and some guys. But the proposition would be you would have to pay for the gas and the operator would have to be a bottom, but we'll loan you any equipment we can to put your conditions back in. So Tom Kerrigan was president and Bob Decker was on the board of directors and Rich Henry was on, and naturally I went down there right after the flood, and they were going to get back in here. We're going to get back in here and straighten this out and all this and that. And I thought to myself, it was just something about it that now's the time to try to find a good piece of land and do something for the town to have a decent place to have a ball field plus other things for it. And that's what encouraged me. And Frank Worley was the lawyer in town, and he told me, I said, we got to do it, Frank, so that the borough becomes the owner of it instead of a private organization like the AA or something like that. Because down the road we can get funds from the federal government, probably in the state, and that was the idea. And he got a hold of the Bowman people. Mrs. Grimwald Bowman said she would sell 12 acres to us, and they filled out, they wanted, I forget what percentage was, they need $900 as a down payment. And Frank said we ought to fix it if we can't get that money into the borough, because you know yourself the borough's not going to use their money to put up $900 to get land, and you don't know what's going to happen. So I went into the credit union up at CAT, and I borrowed $1,000, and on my way home I got the check cashed up in York, and I got 10 $100 bills, and I went to the borough that night and threw it down and says, here, and it took off from there. They accepted it, and we got a lease agreement on the land for a year. We had to, in a year's time, if we didn't pay for that, why, we would have lost. But we got money, and Mr. Goodling, they can say what they want, he was one of my big help behind it. He didn't want anybody to know, but Mr. George Goodling, that's Bill's father, played a big part in getting us some federal monies. He got a hold of I can't think of the fellow's name in York that was serving in the state government, but we got half of the the $18,000, which was $9,000, we got that from the state. And then we had an agreement in there. It's an agreement in the deed that that land can only be used for recreation for the borough of Glen Rock.
That's great.
And it turned out to be a real good thing, because Fran Mowry, when she passed on, she left $750,000 to the Glen Rock Recreation Board, and they get it so much periodically to try to maintain and improve that place. And it turned out to be a good thing.
It's a great park.
But that's just the way it went.
Yeah, I want to really make a point about that, because many of you, I know probably all of you have children in our community, have played baseball or softball or something up at the Glen Rock Park up on top of the hill, or been on their swings or picnic pavilion or something. The man sitting right here, Mr. Daniel Jess Mays, single-handedly, I give credit to getting that thing kicked off. He stopped by his own, borrows $1,000 of at a credit union to get that thing going, and it really shows what kind of community and civic person you are. I mean, that's always been important to you, is being an active part of the community.
But Frank Worley was born and reared in this town, Glen Rock, and when he died up at the Catholic Church, I was at the funeral, and they asked if anybody wanted to say anything, and I got up and went down to his casket and put my hand on his casket, and I said, if anybody's here, they want to know what this man did for his hometown of Glen Rock, ride up Hanover Street and look there at that park. And we owe Frank Worley a big, a thank you note, and that's the way Frank felt about it. He wanted to, he tried to get in World War II for 3 different times. He had a bad diabetes and he couldn't pass the examination. But Frank did a lot, and the thing with Frank was a lot of these elderly Dutch people in this area, they respected him, and they did business with him, and he really helped us. And he and I, when we got the final deed signed, we had to go to Hanover to an old person's home. Mrs. Bowman was there, and she was 90-some years old, and Frank and I went up there with, I'll never forget that. And we went into this home and all, and she was happy to sign that land over to the borough. It was an agreement there that we'd honor their family.
Right. Well, for those of you who don't know, you didn't grow up in the area, Worley's, the Glen Rock Mill Inn, that area now was originally a Worley's store to sell clothing. You could get everything there. I mean, anything you needed. I think I was probably 10 years old when I got my first pair of sneakers. From Worley's, and but Frank Worley was the proprietor of Worley's. Here's something that really is significant in your life and also the life of Susquehannock High School. For many years, probably, the high school opened up in 1952, but for many years, particularly in basketball, not a lot of success. We were the small farming community going to play the York Suburbans and the West Yorks and the city kids. They would call us farmers. I don't think there's anything to hide. But you had 2 sons, Andy and Dan, who in the late 60s teamed up with other guys from Glen Rock who absolutely put Glen Rock and basketball on the map here at Susquehannock High School. And then I still credit the rich history that's followed that in basketball here, really going back to that team. I coached here, but my first love for basketball came watching your 2 sons.
Well, there was 2 other boys these families lived up in Glen Rock together. Rich Henry lived right across the street, and Jim DeVenny's people were in there. His father just died not too long ago. But Jim DeVenny was a starter, and Rich Henry's, Kirk Henry was a starter, and Danny and Andy were starters. And then Mrs. King, she had a grandson that was a starter, but he lived out in the Royal area, but she was Paul Wallace's wife's mother, and she lived up there too. So it just seemed like the 5 starters were from right there within a block of each other.
Yeah, and if you ever watched the movie Hoosiers, and as the whole community followed that team through the playoffs, that was Glen Rock. It really was. I mean, there was a line going up to Hershey Park Arena that was just car after car after car of people from Glen Rock.
The thing about it, Wayne, was there was a lot of people I know, like George Fritz owned this farm over here, and he didn't want to sell no land for school. He wanted to keep that.
Right. But
by gosh, he was up at Hershey Arena that night to see them guys play. I'll never forget that. I couldn't believe it. George Fritz was up there to that game, but a lot of people come out that you had never seen out for basketball.
Oh, it was amazing.
It brought back a lot of memories because Glen Rock built a community building for basketball right after World War War I in the beginning 20s, and they dedicated to the recreation of and they were the littlest town in York County that one of the first that had town team basketball, and they had some good teams during the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, they did. I know education has always been important to you. The life of the school district has always been important to you. In fact, you had also taught adult education here for many, many years for the golf classes. I think probably hundreds of people have gone through your adult education golf classes.
I run into them, and they say, "Don't you remember me? I was in your golf." I couldn't remember them. It was that many. I think it was somewhere. I estimated somewhere between 500 and 600 people took that adult education program. It was cheap, and it was a good thing. The reason I brought this stuff out is, and I wanted to pay respect to Mr. Heron. Frank Heron came here as a teacher, and he advanced up the ladder in administration. He became a administrative assistant to Dr. Hupper, and one of his jobs responsible was for the adult education, and he came to me, he got in touch with me and asked me if I'd take over the golf, and he said, "I'll guarantee I'll keep the daggone grass mowed and all this stuff." And so for about 5 years he was my boss, and I could only handle, I mean, they had to turn down people, you know. We could only, we cut it off at 10 or 12 at the most because you had a hard time. And we had excuse me, we had plenty of area here around the school to hit the balls, then get them up after it's over. But slowly but surely, with the girls' sports more and developing the land stuff, why it went out of whack. You know, we had to give it up.
Right. Mr. Heron, did you know he's now the
superintendent
at Red Line?
Glad I was going to go over and see him. I was glad he's head of the Red Line School District. So he must have had a lot on the ball. I thought the world of him when he was in charge of the adult education program.
Yeah, he's a former Elizabethtown Blue Jay, so he's a former Elizabethtown Blue Jay.
Is
so
he?
Yeah, he and I have a baseball tie from E-Town.
I know she passed on now, but Dolores Beck was a teacher in the system for years, and she thought the world of him. She was real friendly with him when he came here as a teacher.
Yeah, he's truly a great man. You brought a couple things here with us. Is there anything you want to show us before we get wrapped up?
Well, I'm really fortunate about my World War II experience because we had a man and the colonel of our regiment fixed it so that we'd make a history. It's called a True History of the 274th Infantry Regiment in World War II, and it's not too many outfits that have a record like that.
Wow.
And we had, when we went over, we had 3,000 men, and we killed or wounded was 1,246. Distinguished Service Crosses in silver and blue and bronze stars, there was 445 given out, and we had battlefield commissions where 72 men got those. And I became a private, and I was in a program called the Army Specialized Training Program, and I'll tell you, among the alumni in the program were some familiar names that I served with in World War II. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, TV newsman Robert Mudd, and the late Senator Frank Church and Ed Koch, Mayor of New York City. And I was always real proud of the fact that they called us cap and gown soldiers. And when I was in combat, I was driving the company commander from our up front from where we were fighting back to the regimental area at night, and about halfway through the winter of 1945, he came out of the meeting and we were going back up to our area where we were dug in, and he says, "Guess what?" He called me Danny then. He says, "Guess what, Danny?" He says, "Colonel Codley wants every company commander to submit one name for a battlefield commission." He said, "I'd like to recommend you." I said, "Well, what'll happen then?" He said, "Well, you'll go back to Paris for 2 weeks, an accelerated program, they'll commission you, And I said, what'll happen then? He says, you'll go fight the Japs. I said, the hell I will. I don't want nothing to do with that. And I turned down I was only a private. I turned down a battlefield commission. And if I'd have said, yeah, been gung-ho and all, I might not be here today.
Right. Well, we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay.
But, today on
Thank you there,
Pride,
basketball coach.
today on Alumni Pride, we had
Yeah.
a great opportunity to talk to Daniel Jess Mays, truly an icon in Southern York County, if not all of York County, but a man I have just great respect for. And you had a chance today to see why, as he has served our country in World War II, served our community in many, many ways, served our school district in just outstanding service. And let me tell you folks, I think if you're going to live this life, what better thing to do than to say that you've been a service to many, many ways.
I want to
Mr.
thank
Mays.
Wayne from the bottom of my heart for taking this time to put me on this program, and I consider this quite a big privilege.
Mr. Jess Mays, I'm Wayne McCullough for Tim Hare and the Video 3 class here at Susquehannock High School. I'll see you next time.